Okay, we'll go ahead and get started with the CDE and department portion of our virtual training today. We have with us from PCG, John Ward, Rose Jensen, and Jennifer Pham. From CDE, we have Omar Estrada and Sarah Blumenthal. And from the department today, we have myself, Olga Ginchin, and Tracy Gonzalez. And thanks to all of the school districts, the BOCES from across the state, as well as a couple of community partners as stakeholders who are here as well. And I will go ahead and toss it over to Omar, who's going to kick off the CDE presentation. Thanks, Omar.
Thanks, Olga. Okay, so we're going to get started with CDE today. We're switching things up on y'all. So first things first, we're going to look over the agenda real quick. Like I mentioned, we're starting off with CDE right here, covering over the things that we generally talk about on our side of the program: local services plan, a new document for y'all, some website updates, the reimbursement report, and so on. And then I'm going to send it on over back to Olga, who's going to cover some of her items on this list. As we typically do, we always provide these acronyms for you all. If you take a look at this presentation, when you go back to take a look at it again, you can take a look at these acronyms just to see what those are about. Like I mentioned, starting off with CDE, with the local services plan, we're actually very excited to cover a milestone that we are reaching. For those of you that have an LSP that has that previous list of health service categories, which is the list of 24 health service categories. We're excited to say that by October 1st of 2023, the majority of those LSPs on file will be using the updated list of health service categories. And by 2025, all districts are going to be using that new health service category. So we're going to fully transition into this new system that is on the reimbursement spending report whenever you submit those annual reports to us at CDE. Of course, we have those health service categories there. And of course, everyone else will be using this new system. We have all of our templates available on the CDE School Health Services website. So if you want to transition early, that is always an option to not only switch on to the nicer templates that we have available, but also using this new health service category. And really this helps with not only if there's a transition in role, or for those of you that are completing the RSR report and you're looking at whether or not it's aligning with that local service plan, makes it a little easier to see that, these health services are indeed matching on both lists. So if you want to go ahead and then move forward with that revision, you can contact me. It's a straightforward process since we're just updating those documents. And since we just talked about those LSP revisions, they can be initiated at any time during this 5-year period for your LSPs. They, of course, must include a revised LSP and an LSP companion form. Both of the templates for these are available on our website. And if you all remember, those LSP companion forms really just tell us what's the difference between the previous LSP and this new revision that you are submitting for review. This is different from the LSP renewal, which we recommend to take about 10 months to complete. Some districts can complete this a little sooner, but this renewal is when those 5 years are up and you have to submit a brand new LSP. And if you're not familiar of what cohort you're in, or if you want to find out, who else is within your group of same start and end times for your LSPs, we have that available on the website, which I'm going to actually show you at a later point. For those of you that attended the previous annual training, we talked about the expenditure allowability document, and I'm excited to announce that this is available on our website. And this is a new support document for probably one of the most frequent questions I get from districts and BOCES, which is, can I spend these reimbursement dollars on X, Y, or Z? And, for the most part, it can be, straightforward. Look at whether something's a health service, whether it's not. But this document is going to help with some of those, more gray area items. So on the screen, you'll see we have a little bit of an outline. So that document is going to cover questions to consider when spending those Medicaid reimbursement dollars, some strategies to assist in determining expenditure allowability, And probably the more popular one on this document is what are some examples of items that were previously rejected in the past. And we also provide reasoning for why they were rejected. So it kind of speaks to how we kind of look at what exactly makes an expenditure allowable. So like I mentioned, the purpose of this one pager is to support you all in understanding why or what makes an expenditure allowable. We're going to take a look at that document too, but before I jump to our website, I do want to talk about this new set of updates that we had. So I talked about adding the program participants by cohort, but we also just put the entire list of program participants on our main page. So that's available as well. And I mentioned, we also have that same list separated by cohort. And of course, the expenditure allowability document is going to be available under the local service plan box. So if y'all will bear with me, we're going to jump onto the CDE website here and try to remove some of these chats off my screen real quick. And on the CDE website, if you just go into the search bar up here, go ahead and type in Medicaid. That's how I'm able to find my page here. We're going to be the first item on this search list here. So this is our main page. I'm going to try to zoom in so you all are able to see a little better. If you scroll down in the program rules and information section, we have this timeline hyperlink here. If you go ahead and select that. So for those of you that have been on this, we just have this as a placeholder for all of our due dates, relating to the reimbursement spending report, which is this section here. And for those due dates for the LSPs, that section here, that's always been there, but we have recently added this new section, which is the cohort group that I was talking about. So we have different cohorts of when those LSPs start and end, and we just separated them to include what districts are in what particular cohort. So just as an example, this is the 2018-2023. This is the group of districts that are going to be submitting a new LSP August 31st of 2023. So this is if they start in 2018, July 1st, 2018, and if they end June 30th of 2023, this is the district that falls in that cohort. So if you're curious of who is in your fellow cohort group, who you can bounce ideas off, if you're going to be starting a new LSP, you can check out this webpage here. I'm going to go back to the main page, and like I mentioned, under the LSP box, the local services plan box, we have this new document called the expenditure allowability support document. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. And this is the new document here. So I mentioned in the outline, we have questions, strategies, and previously rejected examples. So starting off with this, you all know whenever I talk about this, I always mention two things when it comes to expenditure allowability. The first is, does it align with the local service plan? And the second is it satisfying a health need? So we have those items here, but if you want to go deeper, you can look at some questions when considering spending of those dollars. The first one being, what is the health need being satisfied? And one of the sub questions I have here is, would a reasonable person be able to identify the health need being satisfied? And when I say reasonable person, I really mean a community member. So for those of you that have worked on the LSP, you'll know there's a lot of community questions, a lot of community input being involved in this. So if a member of your community takes a look at the LSP, they'll be able to see how their input leads to the plan of how those dollars are being spent. It's going to be the same for this health expenditure being brought up. So can they see what exactly the health need that is being satisfied with those Medicaid reimbursement dollars? We have another question here, which is, will the purchase accomplish its intended person? Here we have that reasonable person test again. So, you've made the expenditure, but if you have that expenditure, will it actually do what you want it to do, essentially? The second question here is more of a question on opportunity cost. So if you're looking at the expenditure, have you looked at, or are there other lower cost alternatives that is going to equally satisfy that health need? So you don't want to sacrifice, the degree to which that health need is being satisfied when you're looking for those lower cost alternatives. And this last question is similar to the last item for, the next part, the strategies. It's always, your gut feeling. If you're still unsure, of course, I am your support person here. You can always reach out to me via email, via phone, or one-on-one meeting for some additional support. Under strategies, we always like to make sure that coordinators, that districts review those LSPs. We recommend quarterly just to make sure that expenditures are still aligning with that plan. It's something that I look at when our reimbursement spending reports are submitted, just to make sure that there's alignment with the LSP. But it's also just a reminder of what that plan is about, and just gives you a good idea as to whether or not those expenditures are aligning to that LSP. Of course, if you can bill on the billing side of the program, if you can bill for that good or service, you can always use these dollars to pay for those items. That's always good to keep in mind. And we have a lot of documents on our websites and our guidelines. Even on the reimbursement spending report, we have some context-specific support there as well. So if you see items that have been approved in the past, then you, of course, can go ahead and spend dollars on those items. And as I mentioned, of course, I'm always a support for you all, so keep that in mind. Now, this next section here are just previously rejected requests. These are items where we, spoke to the school district, the coordinator, whoever it was, and we mentioned that it might be best to use other source of funding for these items. So I'm going to go through a couple of them here. The first one, transportation FTE costs just for the general population. And we said this wouldn't be allowable because when we look at transportation FTE, we're really looking at those specialized transportation drivers. We're also looking at bus aides, for example, that are serving some health need for a student there. But if the difference here is general transportation FTE wouldn't be allowable, but if you're looking at that same FTE for specialized transportation drivers, that would be the differentiating factor there. So that would be okay. Another thing we're going to look at is purchasing of clothing for general reasons. In this example, we had dress code violations. We said that would not be okay because, of course, if you're just a community member looking at this, you can't really see the health need being satisfied here. I wasn't able to find it. So our reasoning behind this is that dress code violations does not really satisfy a health need. Alternatively, if you're purchasing clothing, keeping them on hand for changing of soiled clothing, that you're purchasing the same item, but in this case, the purpose for that item is servicing a health need, which is hygiene focused. That would be okay. And the last one I want to take a look at is a vacuum for a life skills training program. In this case, we were potentially looking at a lower cost alternative. If there's a used vacuum, that would be okay. However, if that vacuum is part of the curriculum, then it'd be part of the equipment for the curriculum. So, that would be allowable. Just look for a lower cost vacuum. When we were speaking to the coordinator to the district, we also mentioned that a broom could serve the same purpose. So, if that was something that would be acceptable, that would free up more costs for other health-related items for students. So you can see that, some of the questions that we have here really develop the lens with which we use to look at some of the questions that we receive here at CDE as to whether or not certain things can be allowable or not. But I want to make sure that you all know, of course, we'll always be a support to you all here. You can reach out with questions or with some more questions on what makes something allowable. We're always here to help with that. Any questions before I continue on? Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chats. So let's go ahead and move on to the reimbursement spending reports, or the RSR to CDE. We have an upcoming change to the fiscal year 2022 to 2023 RSR. So this isn't this current one that's open to February 28th. This is going to be the following one that's going to open up in October 1st of this year. The change that we're looking at making is the narrative portion of health services categories is now going to be a requirement. So for those of you that have already completed it, you'll know that when you put in an expenditure information, there's going to be a portion where it asks for narrative information, where you provide, what exactly was paid for, was bought, what sort of FTE, were you hiring a health aide, a nurse, etc. in that narrative portion. So this is something that is going to be required in the future. And the reason that we're making it a required item is for some of the reasons that you see on the screen, but really this information was really already being provided by the vast majority of districts and BOCES completing this report. So we were looking at above 80%, closer to 85% of health categories that received some sort of expenditure information also had a narrative portion completed on that report. The only category that was below 80% was outreach and enrollment. And even then, when we look at the broad scale of the data provided, it was really more specific to individual districts that just didn't provide that narrative information that at this time is currently optional. So this will be something that's required. It's going to go really far in helping us not only continue to support you all to identify some of those potentially unallowable costs, make sure we're all ensuring that those items go to health services, they align with the LSP and so on. But we also are able to use that information to create better support documents like the expenditure allowability document that was solely made from what you all provided in terms of data so that we can provide real world examples of what's going on at the local level. And of course, we use that RSR data just in general to look at trends and insights from spending for these dollars. So this will allow us to just boost the usability and the usefulness of this data. So we're going to provide more information, more details at the annual training. We just wanted to make sure to keep this all on your radar for the time being. We also wanted to talk about parental consent forms. So prior to accessing those benefits for the first time, the public agency, or in this case, you all must obtain written parental consent, informing parents of what PII may be disclosed, why, and with whom that information will be shared. So that's something that is required under FERPA. And within those parental consent forms, you might also see the notice to parents of their rights under IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. And we list out the rights there, which have been shortened just for the purposes of this presentation. These are very important documents, so I highly recommend, if you're not familiar with those or if you haven't looked at those, to take a look at those acts in those particular sections, as they are important for not only informing parents of what information is being disclosed, but also their rights as they're signing those forms. And we're bringing this up because we want to make sure that we put out there that this is concerning the disclosure of PII, and it is not a consent to bill Medicaid, which is, it's a difference in the way that it's wording. So this is something that I've made the mistake of doing myself. So just to let you all know, I mean, I made that mistake myself, but we want to make sure that you all know that this is concerning the disclosure of PII, even if it's for brevity's sake, the focus should be on that as opposed to consenting to bill Medicaid, which is something different. So like I mentioned, if you're unfamiliar with those one-time consent forms, or really the annual notification practices that are attached to the forms themselves under IDEA, speak to your legal team and get that information that you need. And just as a note, just speaking on how we use that information on our side, when you complete those RSR reports, there's a section, a question on there that asks whether or not those annual notification forms have been sent out. So that's where you're going to see that information. We also link to the information on IDEA. And for those of you that are under comprehensive review, that's when we take a look at CDE, those parental consent forms for the sample of students that you all receive. So that's the connection back to the program on our side. Now, I want to finish off with some exciting future projects. So just based on conversations we had with the stakeholders and, with some individual districts, we're going to be looking at redesigning the data flyers. So for those of you that are maybe newer, when you submit the reimbursement spending report, we gather that information, we send it to the department for their reporting purposes, but we also look at returning that information back to you all in the form of what we call data flyers. So you'll get the state version and you'll also get the local version, which is the district or BOCES data flyer. If you haven't seen it, you can always reach out to me. I'll send you what we have for your district. And in the future, they're going to look a little bit different. So this is not going to be this next data flyer coming out, but we're going to be looking at the one after this reporting period. And finally, we're going to be looking at creating a CDE SHS education tool just for self-paced learning for all things related to the spending side of the program here at CDE, what we do. So that's something that's also going to be coming out. If you have someone transitioning roles, just wants more information on what we do at CDE for this program, hopefully we'll be able to have this tool ready soon for available self-paced learning purposes. And if you have any other specific needs or requests, you can always send that to us. We always make sure to use that information when we start to look at new projects. I always finish off with reminders. So if your district or BOCES local services plan to end this year, a new one is going to be due August 31st of 2023. And again, if you don't know when yours ends, you can always look at that timeline hyperlink on our website to find your specific cohort. Reimbursement spending reports are going to be due at the end of this month, Tuesday, February 28th. And for those of you under comprehensive review, those parental consent forms that I talked about, those are also going to be due at the end of this month as well. I have many different options for you all to contact me. So we, of course, have email. You can give me a call with that number on the screen, or you can also look at my Doodle dashboard and set up a one-to-one item to just put something on my screen. So, always here to help y'all with anything you need. Before I pass it off, is there any other questions for me I can answer? Thanks, everyone. I appreciate it. Thank you, Adeline. Okay. Oh, yes, Christina, do you have I see you have your hand raised?
Hey, Omar. I just have a quick question about the RSR cheat sheet and the expenditure calculator, which is kind of, I think, a new addition to the cheat sheet this year.
Yep.
I have watched the video walkthrough, and I apologize, I don't remember, but I started working on it. And when I put everything in the expenditure calculator, should it automatically transfer to the rest of the spreadsheet, or do I still need to go in and do it's not pulling it right now for me.
No, it's not. The calculator, and for those of you that haven't used the cheat sheet that we have available on our website, it's just something to hold that RSR data until you can then transfer it to the actual RSR report, which is an online form that we use. But the calculator is just an entirely separate item that's going to be separate from the rest of the document. So you can either use the calculator just to keep a running list of expenditures coming in, or you can put that information in what was available in the past, which is the other 4 tabs covering admin, covering health services, and so on. So they shouldn't be transferring over.
Okay, thanks. I wasn't sure if that was user error on my part or not, but
no, that's how it's supposed
great.
to be. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, if I see no other items on here, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to Olga.
Okay, thank you, Omar, and thanks everyone for being here today. I'm going to do the department portion of our training. Again, my name is Olga Ginshin, and I'm the program administrator for the School Health Services program for the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing here in Colorado. You will hear us referred to as HCPF, and throughout this presentation, you will hear us referred to as the department. Next slide, please. First, wanted to share this organizational chart with you for the program. So if this is something that you're a new coordinator or something that has been unclear to you, just the overall structure of the program, I would highly encourage you to print this slide and just hang it up in your workstation for reference. It does give a good general overview of the program and just how it's structured. So starting at the top there, with the federal agencies. You can see the U.S. Department of Education and Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, CMS. So both of those federal agencies, they issue national laws and guidance. And then when there's something that pertains to both of them, they will consult with each other regarding that issue that overlaps both of those agencies. Then those federal agencies, when they issue the national laws and guidance, those then trickle down to the state agencies and their respective agencies. So Colorado Department of Education, CDE, that's OMAR. And then the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing, the department myself. And it is a jointly administered program at the state level for the state of Colorado. Then Public Consulting Group is our state vendor that helps with the administration of the program. So things like the random moment time study, cost reporting, those reviews, the program reviews, and training. You see them here today, right? So the contract is with the department, and really those three organizations at the state level, CDE, the department, and PCG, should really be your first line of contact for any questions related to the program. So those three organizations then support the districts and BOCES that participate across the state. Districts and BOCES can elect to, they don't have to, contract with the billing agent. We do have 3 different billing agents across the state in Colorado, and then you can also elect to self-bill. Again, that contract is with the district or BOCES, so the billing agent contracts directly with that district or BOCES, and then the billing agent or the district themselves sends that billing data back up to the department. So again, I think this is a helpful chart that should provide some clarity about how the program is structured in the state of Colorado. Next slide, please. National Provider Identifier NPI requirement, next steps. So you all know that a little over a year ago, for any PT, OT, or speech services with a date of service of January 1, 2022 or later, required the district or BOCES NPI in that ordering provider field. So that was the requirement just a little bit over a year ago. And now we're sort of gradually moving into phase 2 of that requirement. And that is that individual providers are going to obtain an NPI and also be registered as a Medicaid provider. Our stakeholders have generously agreed to start that phase 2 and help us develop best practices so that all their member districts, so all of the districts across the state, will have that requirement for that individual provider NPI in place by the end of fiscal year 2023-24. So June 30th of 2024, we would like all the districts across the state of Colorado that participate to have that individual provider NPI in there. So thanks again to stakeholders for putting those best practices together. We've already learned a lot about this process so far. And do we have any stakeholders on today that want to share their experiences with this process so far? You can take yourself off mute if you'd like.
Hi, everyone. This is Marley Hart. I'm the stakeholder for the Southwest region and also supporting the Northwest region. We are just starting to test out the entire enrollment phase with a single speech, PT, and OT. And it's really exciting. The NPI process has so far proved to be quite simple and a really quick turnaround. So at least as far as I'm concerned, that seems to be the easiest part of this process, and definitely get started on it as early as you'd like. It's very straightforward. And we found that actually about 35% of our providers already have an NPI, which was exciting.
Great. Thank you so much, Marley. I appreciate you providing that additional information. And that is true. The NPI part is the easiest part. I think it's pretty quick for a provider to get that NPI, and a lot of them already have that. It is going to be a little bit longer process to be registered as a Medicaid provider. So hopefully that NPI process isn't too hard. It is going to just be a little lengthier for the Medicaid part of it. So thanks again, Marley, and to all of our stakeholders for helping out with that. And also just wanted to remind everyone that the previous requirement was a DK qualifier. Now it's DK, DN, or DQ. I sent an email about that a few weeks ago. So next slide, please, Omar. Quick reminder about billing for services. So this is when we were talking about, if you came to our morning session, my breakout group was for billing. So this is where I mentioned that I was going to talk about it just a little bit more. It is a contract requirement that you bill for those services. It is proof of service that those health services for the Medicaid reimbursement program are taking place. You can view those claims in Interchange, and the billing should be reflective of the job categories that are on your staff pool list. It is the district's responsibility to ensure proper billing, even if you work with a billing agent. It is really important for you to keep a good eye on that billing and make that part of your ongoing processes to monitor for program compliance. It's going to be even more important as we're moving forward with this NPI requirement as that next step is in place. Because one of the most important reasons is because you have a 120-day timely filing period. You can catch any potential errors before I would be able to. By the time I look, it's that 120 timely filing period has passed, and it's too late to correct any mistakes that you might find. So really make that part of your ongoing processes. Make sure that you're looking at them before the 120-day timely filing period has passed to make sure that you are keeping up with that requirement of your contract for this program. And as far as you mean special service providers, I do see a question in here from Sarah Bell. How are the special service providers, I think that's what you mean by SSPs, reacting to having these two processes done? I can't react to that. I can't provide very much information because I'm not on that side of things with this, but the stakeholders could. But again, a lot of them already have their NPIs, and this is something that happens in the community already if they're practicing in the community, and it's something that happens nationwide. So if you had gone to the name convention, then you would have seen that and talked to other school districts from across the United States. This is something that's been in place for a while for them, and Colorado is just catching up. And Marley replied also, so far they've been receptive, just rolling out a test procedure to a small group, but no one has refused. So thanks again for that, Marley. And Christina asked, does the NPI requirement apply to nurses and school psychs as well? It does not. It's only those OTs, PTs, and speech providers. And when I talk about speech providers, I'm talking about licensed speech language pathologists. Any other questions before I move on to the next slide? Again, you can toss it in the chat, just take yourself off mute, or you can use the raise your hand feature in the reaction section there at the bottom. So Cindy, that's when for the NPI process, she asked, how do we start the process? We are developing those best practices right now. So nothing for you to do. You can give it some thought if you'd like, but we are working with the stakeholders to get really some solid processes in place so that you can really benefit from their experiences having gone through this process. So for right now, I would just hold off and wait for us to issue those best practices, because you will have an entire fiscal year in order to complete that process. At least that's what our plan is right now. And again, we're still learning about this and putting those best practices together. Yep, happy to answer any questions. Thank you, Cindy. Next slide, please. our school health services program stakeholders. So you've already heard from Marley, and we're again very grateful for all of the things that our stakeholders do, including that NPI process and helping us learn about that. They help us with idea exchange, training, mentorship, information dissemination, and program knowledge. Next slide, please. And we have a great stakeholder website, so you can find out who your stakeholder is. Their contact information is in there. We have meeting dates in there, so you can see what our upcoming stakeholder meeting dates are. We also have a stakeholder areas of knowledge grid, which I think is a great tool if you're not sure who to ask about a certain aspect of the program. You can go out there, look at the stakeholder website, look at that stakeholder areas of knowledge grid and say, okay, I'm a coordinator in a small district, and I want to get a small district's perception of the local services plan, their experience with that. I look at the stakeholder areas of knowledge grid. I see that Jessie is in a small district, and I want to reach out to her regarding her experiences on the local services plan. You can actually just click on those names at the top of the grid, and it will just automatically generate an email to them. Next slide, please. And who is your stakeholder? I think we have 3 on the line right now. So you can go to the website and find out who your stakeholder is. And I'm just going to ask right now that the stakeholders we have on the phone or on this virtual session would just unmute themselves. And I know, Marley, you already introduced yourself, but would you just mind doing that one more time, taking yourself off mute and just saying which regions you represent again, please?
Sure, Olga. I'm Marley Hart. I represent the Southwest region, and I'm also working with Hattie Pinkston of Durango to support the Northwest region.
Thank you again. And Joe Kinney, would you take yourself off mute, please, and introduce yourself as what your role is as a stakeholder? If Joe is,
There we are.
there we go.
I'm Joe Kinney. I'm with Kinney Management Services. I am one of the billing agents here in the state, and I can assist pretty much anybody if you reach out to me.
Thank you, Joe.
Yep.
And Aurora?
Hi, I'm Aurora Villarreal. I am with Frontline, one of the billing vendors, and I am the compliance specialist there.
Thank you, Aurora. Did I miss anyone? Any stakeholders sneak on here that I didn't catch? Okay, thank you all for just taking a second to introduce yourselves. And next slide, please. As I mentioned, the National Alliance for Medicaid and Education, NAME, we had that conference back in October and saw a lot of familiar faces across Colorado. So that was great to see so many people from Colorado representing this program. There were some great presentations and really robust discussions. If you were there was a lot going on at NAME. And one of the reasons, 2 of the reasons really, are because of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act and the resulting CMCS informational bulletins that came out back in August. So a lot of information in those 2 items, and we are expecting some things to come from both of those. So there's going to be a $50 million grant. That's a nationwide grant as a result of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. There is also going to be a technical assistance center that's going to be established, and also finally a technical assistance guide that we are expecting to be issued by the end of June of this year. So that is something we haven't seen for 20 years. We haven't had an updated technical assistance guide for 20 years. So it is definitely long overdue to get that information. And anybody that was at NAME, would you like to take yourselves off mute and just share anything that that you experienced there? Now, like I said, we had a pretty large Colorado delegation, so you can raise your hand or toss something in the chat or just come off mute again. And that's fine too. If you, yep, Marley, I see you unmuted. Go right ahead.
I didn't want to step over anyone. My big takeaway was the robust discussions that our LEAs and our states had with CMS. They were really open to engagement and explaining these new processes and rules that are coming forward. And we're looking forward to continued opportunities like that at our future name conferences, which is quite exciting.
Absolutely. And we are part of those conversations as well. So if any school districts or BOCES from across the state have any questions, concerns, definitely reach out to me. If there are things that you've seen in these two items, I'm happy to pass those along as we are part of those discussions. And in our updated slides that we're going to upload within the next couple of weeks, I'll put the links to both of those things on this slide. All right, next slide, please. End of the COVID-19 continuous coverage requirement planning. Next slide. So you all know that there was a public health emergency declared in January 2020 in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, and that was issued by the Department of Health and Human Services. And Congress later passed legislation that basically said, as long as someone is qualified and enrolled in Health First Colorado, they can keep their coverage as long as the PHE was continuing. That was known as the continuous coverage requirement. Then a little bit over a month ago, Congress signed it was signed into law, the Consolidated Appropriations Act. And that was, like I said, a little over a month ago, that ended the Medicaid continuous coverage requirement. And that separated the PHE from that continuous coverage requirement. So what does it mean for the continuous coverage requirement to end? Next slide, please. That means that members are going to start getting renewal notices, and that's going to start next month. And those first round of renewals are due in May of 2023. So they have 2 months to return those. It's going to take 12 months for this whole process to happen because we do have 1.7 million members for Health First Colorado. All the members are not going to be renewed at the same time. They're going to be aligned with the renewal month that was already established. Definitely very important for the members to pay attention to those renewal notices so that they don't lose their coverage if they're still eligible. Next slide, please. So there is a lot of information on all of these slides. I'm going to keep it really high level, but again, these slides are going to be available on the website and you're welcome to go and refer back to them. They have some especially helpful resources that you can use to support the families in your district or BOCES. So that's one reason that we're telling you this information now, is because you can help us with some of that outreach to your families in your districts and make sure that they're not losing the coverage if they're still eligible. Second is this affects your Medicaid enrollment rate. Your Medicaid enrollment rate is one of those ratios that's applied to your reimbursement. So definitely don't want families to lose coverage if they're still eligible, and and it impacts your reimbursement as well. So next slide, please. So here are all of the supports that we have in place right now to help your families. Next slide. We have partner resources in both English and Spanish. Next slide. One of the biggest things you can do is just help your families make sure that their address is up to date. If we have an outdated address, they're not going to get those renewal notices, and then they could lose their coverage even if they're eligible. So really make sure that you're getting the word out that they have the most updated address on file with us so that they get those renewal notices in the first place. Next slide. There's a preparing for renewals toolkit. Again, that's in English and Spanish as well. Next slide. There is a video series. This can be used for both partners like yourself or members, and they're just very high level, very short videos that explain the renewal process. Next slide. And there's also a Health First Colorado renewals page that rather than watching a video, you can just read through a very high level of what the renewals process includes. Next slide. And the tools for use launching this month. Next slide, please. And here are all the things that you can do. Get out to that PHE planning website and look at all the tools that are available to you. Make sure that you sign up for the newsletter, and it's going to tell you any new tools that are released that can help with this process. There's a quarterly webinar. The next one is in April. You can download those communications toolkits and just continue to get out to that website, because as the department learns new FAQs, they will update the website with those new FAQs. Next slide. And just a quick plug for our school health services program website. Get out there, please. And like Jen mentioned before, if you don't have it bookmarked, I would highly recommend, if you don't have anything else bookmarked, please bookmark this website. There's past presentations and training dates. If you haven't signed up for the newsletter, that's another great source of information. Our program manual has really just all the most important stuff for the program and a lot more. What questions do you have for me today? You can go to the next slide. It's a lot of information, I know, so I'll hang out for just a minute here. And again, take yourself off mute, raise your hand, put something in the chat, and happy to answer any questions.
Hi, Olga. It's
Hi,
Leticia.
Leticia.
Quick
Hello.
question. So for the end of the PHE, it will be required every single person to take action, correct? There will be no auto renew. There will be no, you have to have some sort of signature or data. You have to take an action, correct?
Right. Yeah, they have to complete that re-enrollment process.
Okay. And then for those who have moved addresses, what is the plan B for the state to catch up with these people?
That is the biggest thing that we need your help with, just to make sure that they have their addresses, so you can go out to that website. They have all of the different actions that are in place that the department is doing. And we don't know where they are if we don't know where they are. So it is a concern.
Yeah. Well, good. Thank you.
Yeah. And Cindy put something in the chat. This is off topic, but are those staff I pay with Medicaid funds required to submit monthly time and effort logs? Do you mean, are they the ones you pay with Medicaid funds? Are you asking if they're required to do the RMTS? Is that what you're asking? And the answer to that, if that's what you're asking, if they have to do the, or are you asking about billing? So I can answer both of those questions. So if someone is on your staff pool list, those licensed providers, they do need to submit the service documentation. So that billing portion as proof that those health services are actually happening. And that really needs to align with the job categories and with the individuals that are on your staff pool list. Okay, so let's just say that you have 50 SLPs, licensed providers that are on your staff pool list. I'm going to expect to see some SLP services on that billing report, and they will also receive the random moment time study. Cindy said, no, we have a new grants director who thinks my staff needs to submit something called a time and effort form to the state. Omar, is that something you're familiar with? I think maybe that might be out of the scope of the school health services program from my perspective anyway, from the department's side of things.
Yeah, it's because at least when as it pertains to our side of the program for like the reimbursement spending report, we don't request that you submit time and effort reports for this program, but it, you know, it might be, like Olga said, outside of this.
Yeah, not for this grant,
Yep.
not
Thank you,
for this
Hillary.
program. And Adeline said, can you put in the chat the link for the chart that had which stakeholder to ask for certain topics? Yeah, that is on our website. So that's one of the links in the program website, and it has a stakeholder section in there.
Mhm. So I put the link to the stakeholder content knowledge area, and I also put in the link to the stakeholder forum portion of the department website.
Okay,
course.
yeah, happy to help. Thanks, Omar.
Mhm.
Other questions? Thank you so much for asking questions. Okay, well, we will hang out just a little bit longer, but that is the end of the CDE and department portion of our virtual training session for mid-year today. So we'll stick around just a little bit longer to answer any remaining questions. Otherwise, I believe our next session is at 1 o'clock this afternoon for the random moment time study mid-year training session. And if you signed up for that, we'll see you then. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Hey, Olga, I have a quick question.
Go for it.
Are they all the OTs, PTs, and speeches? They do have an NPI, right?
They
Or
could.
oh,
It's yeah. If they're already practicing in the community, they could already have one, but it's not guaranteed. You know, if they are just practicing within their school and it wasn't required of them, they may not have one.
so then they just have to request for the NPI.
Mm-hmm. NPI, and then they have to do the Medicaid provider as well.
The Medicaid provider. And then after that is completed, I just put that on a folder, and do I send this to you, or I just wait it when it's requested?
You would talk to your billing agent to make sure that those numbers are placed in the appropriate fields.
Okay.
But again, we'll provide a lot more information after we get those best practices written down and get them out to all the remaining districts.
Okay, I just got a little anxious. I'm like, should I start right now? So
No, we just didn't want it to be a surprise for next year. So just putting it on your radar, nothing for you to do right now. You can put some thought into it if you want, but I think it's going to be really valuable to get that stakeholder feedback first, learn from them having gone through the process, and then you can really put a plan together that will work for your district.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah,
Appreciate your time.
Anytime. Thank you, Leticia. Thanks for all the thanks in the chat.